for some of you who don't know, like the Ginger Snap story is like I had this restaurant on so many levels. It was incredibly successful. I was invited to everything. Everyone knew who I was. And again, I created that restaurant out of nothing. I knew no one. I moved back to New York City and I just created something really amazing and something I was super passionate about. Now, someone could say like it was a mistake because it was probably or six, I don't even know how many years it was, of the most miserable years of my life, right? It was really, really horrible on so many levels for me, right? But it's absolutely why I'm here, right? And even though it was so hard, and even though like it really was constant anxiety, and like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing, at that time it was what I was supposed to be doing. But I was doing enough work on myself that I worked with coach. You know, she asked me the question. I realized, oh my God, I should shut it down, right? She asked me like, what if Ginger Snaps isn't it? And as I did that, it was incredibly scary. I didn't know who I was or what my identity was. What if I wasn't going to be invited any place? What if all of a sudden no one cared who I was anymore? What if I had to admit to everyone, oh my God, my restaurant failed because I'm closing it? Right? All those things had to happen and they were really scary, but I had already started working a little bit with clients. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go with this and I'm going to see what happens. Right. And so it's like I had to make these really scary moves. And then even in that, like me, I've told this story before, but like with my office, like when I signed for my office, it was delusional. It was so delusional that I like had the idea to sign a year-long lease for a full-time office when I did not in any way have the client load to be doing that at all. But what would happen for me was is that I was taking all my crystals everywhere, walking around the city and like going to different, like I was renting out places by the hour, by the day. And it was insane because I was literally carrying meditation pillows. It was ludicrous. And when I would sit in meditation, like what's supposed to happen? And I would see these crystals that are actually my childhood crystals, and they're very heavy. They're from my parents called them rocks. They're crystals though. And they had them, I had them growing up and they had given them to me. I had them ever since college. And in all my meditations, those crystals were there. And I'm like, there is no way I'm lugging those around. Like those are like 40, like I'm not lugging that around. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And then I kept on being like, well, maybe I'm supposed to have like my own part-time space. And like, maybe I can put the crystals there or something like that. And I can share the space. I'm like, oh, but I don't know if I want anyone to share my crystals. But I'm like, let me see. And like in my meditations, so again, going into the idea that I couldn't create something that wasn't yet. So I had a friend, Michelle, and she had an office downtown in Soho. So I recently realized that this is why I looped. I looped the idea that my office was in Soho because she didn't rent it full time. It was like a part-time office for a few days. So I kept on in my meditation, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to Soho. And all my Google searches were for office spaces in Soho. And I would be in these meditations and I kept on making a left out of my apartment. Making a left out of my apartment is the opposite of Soho. It's the other direction. And it was like making me crazy, but I'm like, I don't know why I keep doing this, but I still kept on looking Soho, kept on looking Soho. I was on a plane ride and I was on like listening to a podcast and I was on like the fifth page of Google. I don't even know how I got to the fifth page of Google because usually I give up by then. And it was some office for 20th West 20th Street. And I was like, oh, I live on 16th Street. I was like, I would make a left. I would make a left if I was going to 20th West 20th Street. And there was only full-time offices. I'm like, full-time offices. And like, I was like, I'm not at all ready to make a full-time office. I can't do that. I'm not there. I'm not there. And I made the left. And so I called them and I remember I was away at the time. I called them. I didn't even give them my real email. Like I was so scared of making this move. I gave them like my junk email because I didn't want them to know who I was in case I like wasn't going to go to the appointment. I was so scared because I was like, there's no way I can afford this right now. And I wound up going when I got back from my trip and I walk into this space and it was the exact space of my meditation. Like it was like wild to me. I was like, it was just this, it was a narrow space with high ceilings. And I remember my husband is the one who like set up my restaurants before, like he laid them out. Like he's much more visual than me. Like I'm not a good visual. I have to have someone draw it out for me to see it, or I should say I used to be that way. I walked into this office and I was like, oh my God, it's it. They only have year leases and I had to furnish it. And it's like all the things I had to do. And I'm like, I'm doing it. I didn't even call and ask anyone. I did it. And I remember like then he was like trying to help me furnish it. I'm like, I know where everything goes. It was in my meditation. Like I know exact couch I need. I know everything I need to do. And we wound up getting it. And my mom and my dad came to visit it. And this is like before I even started taking clients there. My mom looks at, she's like, oh, maybe you can share it with a friend. Maybe you can find someone who could rent it out some of the days that you're not there. And my dad was like, it's beautiful. It's small. You're gonna need a bigger space soon. And I have both those stories going on in my head, right? As we all do. And I decided to step into the delusion of my father that I was going to outgrow this before I can imagine. And within 6 months, I was in a bigger office, double the size, double the rent, double the size, and not needing anyone to share it with me, right? And I think that like the point of that long story is that like it was delusional. It was delusional, but I was spending a lot of time in the vortex because I knew that I was at this pivotal moment where like what I was doing wasn't working anymore. And there was a move I had to make, right? And the only reason why I even looked at that apartment, I mean, at that space, was because in my meditation, I kept on making a left. And so something in me was like, just go look at it. You made a left, right? And then the crystals were there. I'm like, okay, I guess it's a full-time office. So all these things were partially because I delusionally spent time in this space beforehand, right? And so like that's kind of like what we're doing in this vortex. We're going to something that like isn't happening yet. It's outside, and it might mean that you're going to have to take moves that are like, I don't know that I can make this move yet. Like this doesn't make sense. And it's okay for it not to make sense. Almost all of the greatest creations that have ever happened are because they didn't make sense, right? And that's how they created something new, you know? And I think it's really important. And I think that one of the things is that we all forget that like we're here on purpose for purpose, right? And like the things that we're supposed to do are our things to do. So you can be in spaces where you believe that things are too crowded or there's no room for you or it's not going to happen for you, but you want to step into like how are you doing it differently that you're bringing your view on it.